Welcome to Conversations Different, the podcast of the Santa Fe New Mexican, featuring the interesting people, places, and issues of northern New Mexico. This is Inez Russell Gomez, and this week we are focusing on the operations of New Mexico's public lands, specifically how reforms at the Game and Fish Department could improve how they work and protect wildlife and hunting access and fishing access and all of the above. That's something coming up at the next session of the legislature, and with us to discuss it are Jesse Deubel, Executive Director of New Mexico Wildlife Federation, and Judy Calman, New Mexico Policy Director for Audubon Southwest. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much, Inez. I appreciate you having us on.
Yes, thank you.
Why don't we talk about what's been happening at the Game and Fish Department and why there is a need to reform how it operates, Jesse?
Well, there's been some real challenges with the agency over the years. The New Mexico Wildlife Federation worked more than 100 years ago to establish the New Mexico State Game Commission. And that commission was designed to serve as insulation between politics and wildlife management. It was designed so that wildlife management decisions could be made without political interference. And for quite some years now, that's been not working super effectively. We've been having a lot of challenges with the State Game Commission, and the commission oversees the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish, which is our state wildlife agency.
So we think of it as a place where we go get our licenses to go hunting or fishing, but really you could say it has a broader mandate?
That's correct. The New Mexico Department of Game and Fish, again, is our state wildlife agency. Therefore, it has a responsibility to managing, protecting, and ensuring robust populations of all of the diverse wildlife species that exist in New Mexico.
Now, Judy, you're with the Audubon Society, which we all think about as, birds and all that kind of stuff. Talk about why your organization is part of this reform effort.
Well, so like you said, our organization is primarily focused on birds and the things that they need. That includes now clean water and clean air and all the things that people and other species need too. And the Game and Fish Department is responsible for managing bird populations in addition to game and fish species. And we just feel like there's a disproportionate level of staffing and attention placed on game species where there should be sort of equal prioritization of non-game species, the species that are not specifically hunted and fished. You can see this in their staffing just for bird biologists. I actually have the numbers here. The department has 4 bird biologists right now.
And that's for the whole state?
That is for the whole
And we're
state.
not exactly a little state, are we?
We are not a little state, and it gets even a little bit crazier. So of those 4 biologists for birds specifically, they have one for migratory game birds, which is about 25 to 30 species. They have another person just for upland game birds, which is about 6 to 8 species. They have one biologist just for the lesser prairie chicken, which is a specific listed species in southeast New Mexico that needs some extra attention. And then they have one bird biologist for all the other bird species in the state, which is over 200 that they're specifically charged with managing. And that's not even including some other species that aren't actively managed by the department. So you can see there that there is a huge need for some additional attention to so-called non-game birds and other wildlife.
So what you guys are saying is that this is a department, if it's going to manage wildlife, it can't just focus on the things that people hunt or that they fish or that they shoot at or somehow grab.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Inez. The New Mexico Department of Game and Fish, folks should know, is an enterprise agency. That means that essentially all of its funding is...
They fund themselves, basically.
Correct. It's self-funded. It's a result of hunting and fishing license sales and some matching federal dollars that are generated through excise taxes on firearms, ammunition, fishing equipment, so on and so forth. And because it's the game species that have funded the department...
That's where they focus their attention.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of attention focused on the game species. So Judy and I, as well as a large, broad, diverse coalition of wildlife advocates, are working on a piece of legislation that is going to create a 21st century wildlife management system for New Mexico. And that's really what we're here to talk about.
And this is something that Representative Matthew McQueen has worked on as well for a number of years. And part of, if I'm remembering correctly, part of the issue was that you couldn't actually run the department because there weren't enough game commissioners to take votes or to show up, and that was an issue. So there was the structure of the management at the top, and then there was the focus of the department.
That's correct. So really, in order, the Game Commission has been an ongoing issue. There's also issues with funding and resources, as Judy just mentioned. So in order to really fix the problems that exist, we need to do three things. We need to update the Department of Game and Fish's mission. We need to fix the State Game Commission. And we need to provide funding to sustain the hunting traditions and improve wildlife conditions on the landscape.
Okay, because you can't go hunting if there's no animals to go after. And I think, Judy, one of the things that you mentioned about the bird species is that if the habitat is good for the non-game birds, it would seem to me maybe this is too simplistic, but it might be good for the game birds too.
No, that's definitely correct. So we know that the Game and Fish Department often does, but always should look at wildlife management in a holistic, ecosystem-focused way. And it's totally true that, projects that benefit game animals will also benefit non-game animals. Projects that benefit non-game animals will also benefit game animals, and we know that. But we're trying to give equal prioritization to sort of all species of wildlife in the state. And Audubon specifically is feeling like that's extremely important just because of how popular wildlife and bird watching is. Audubon itself has 15,000 members in the state. Wildlife viewing and bird watching is one of the fastest growing activities in the United States. Yeah. We know that New Mexicans care about wildlife, not just for hunting and fishing, but for watching and appreciating too. So we just want the department's focus to be sort of equalized in that way.
Broaden it. And one of the ways, if I remember right, that they're changing it would have a different name.
Perhaps there has been discussion about changing the name of the agency from the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish to the New Mexico Department of Wildlife Conservation. And the department already does a lot of great work with non-game species, and so I think that name more accurately represents the work that the department is already doing. And regarding the legislative package, I'd like to talk about two things that we've been working on, and then provide Judy the opportunity to talk about the third thing, if that's all right.
Okay, so let's do that as soon as we come back from the break. We'll be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
HomeWise is a local New Mexico nonprofit committed to increasing the availability of affordable homes for working people in Santa Fe. Our HomeWise Homes communities provide quality-built, energy-efficient homes with up to 40% of the houses reserved for modest-income buyers. Our newest community, Miraflores, offers single-family homes with spacious backyards, a family-friendly environment, and convenient access to the Tierra Contenta Trail Network. Standard features include low-E vinyl windows, stainless steel appliances, granite kitchen countertops, a tankless water heater, and more. Contact us today to learn more about Miraflores. Call 505-983-9473 or visit us at homewise.org. Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 188231.
We are back with Conversations Different, discussing how New Mexico can better manage its wildlife for everyone in the state, with Jesse and with Judy. Before the break, we were talking about a legislative approach that is expected at the next session in January next month. So, Jesse, talk about the different ways that the Game and Fish Department might be reimagined.
Yeah, thank you, Inez. I'll talk about two components of this legislative package and then provide Judy the opportunity to expand on the third thing. The first one is that the fact that the department is facing a funding crisis. As I just mentioned, it's an enterprise agency, so it relies on hunting and fishing license fees. It should be noted that those fees have not been adjusted for 20 years. So it's been a long time since the department's had an adjustment to their primary revenue source. And
so they haven't raised the prices,
They have not raised the prices for 20 years. And hunters and anglers, we pride ourselves in providing conservation funding. We pride ourselves in being conservationists and providing the dollars that our biologists and our law enforcement officers need to do their jobs effectively. So we're happy to pay more for those licenses, knowing that that money is going to support the wildlife we care about and depend upon, and the agency that manages it for us. On average, the a license might go up by $15 for an annual license in the state of New Mexico. There's a lot of different license types, but a $15 increase on average is not too much of a burden on the hunting and fishing community. So we're excited about that change, and we're excited to provide the department with more of the resources that it desperately needs and also deserves. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to fix the State Game Commission. As I said, more than 100 years ago, the New Mexico Wildlife Federation, and
that's your group,
our group, and other members of the New Mexico conservation community set the commission up, and we did it to create an independent body that would shield the agency from political influence.
Now, talk about why, because some people may be unfamiliar with New Mexico history, might wonder what is political about an elk hunt or something. And in our history, we've had people who might give a great hunt to their younger brother instead of letting it be fairly shipped across, the state. So it's political because if you're managing a species to benefit one group or another, that's incorrect. Just as with the water access right now, where some wealthy out-of-state landowners didn't want people using the rivers, which is a guaranteed right in the Constitution.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Inez. So when it comes to the political installation, here's what's important, is that we're following the North American model of wildlife conservation. That's what our agency should be following. And there are 7 tenets to that model. And for the sake of time, I won't go over all of them, but I will say that wildlife management decisions need to be based in science. And so our biologists at the agency are working with the science, but a lot of the social pressures are decided upon by the State Game Commission. And some of those pressures include things like hunting tag allocation. We have a limited amount of hunting opportunity, and we have an abundance of people who want to participate in the activity. That means not everybody in the state of New Mexico is going to get an elk tag every single year. Not everybody that wants one gets one. Well, how are we making the decisions as to who gets that opportunity? Those are the kind of things the commission does, and the commission needs to be able to do that without political influence that's deciding that they're making decisions based on political things instead of
and there's out-of-state pressure as well, because states around us don't have the same kind of public access to hunting. And people from Oklahoma or Arkansas or Texas might want to come here and pay a lot for a hunt.
That's correct. Non-residents pay more than residents, so there's a financial component there. But the fact that New Mexico is so abundant in public lands, nearly half of our state is public land, and also we have an incredible biodiversity of species to pursue, much more than a lot of the states to the east of us. And so that adds to the abundance of demand for these license fees. And so it's important for us that we reform the State Game Commission. And the problems with the commission have been very well documented. I think most of your listeners are aware that there are issues this bill
including not having a full quorum for much of the last couple of years.
That's correct. Commissioners have been removed from their post, and then there's been lag times in getting commissioners re-added to the commission. And I'll say that this is not an issue exclusive to this administration or this governor. This issue's been going on for a long time. It's not a partisan issue. It's a long-standing problem that needs to be fixed. And luckily, with Judy's help and the help of a broad coalition of groups, we're working to get it fixed this upcoming legislative session. And maybe Judy would like to talk a little bit more about the third piece of the bill.
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. So the third piece of the bill is really just ensuring that the mission of the agency and the statutes that authorize the agency to do its work give it authority to do what it needs to do based on science, as Jesse said. And so right now, the way the statutes are written, it's a little unclear that the department has authority to work on any species that it needs to. So we're proposing to, I wouldn't say expand the mission, but clarify the mission of the department so that it knows that it has the authority to work on any species it wants to work on. And we're basically trying to, like I say, equalize the attention it gives to all species wherever it's needed based on scientific information. And we do that by changing the language we use and the funding allocations for the department. And so we're talking about changing the name to the Wildlife Department, making it clear in the statutes that they're supposed to look at ecosystems as a whole, look at all species that need it. And we're also, I want to just add on to Jesse's piece about the license fee increase. Our coalition is very diverse and broad and doesn't just include hunting and fishing organizations. And we know that it's also everybody's responsibility to help pay for the department. And we know that hunting and fishing communities have been paying for the department for its history. And so we're also always looking, including during this session, for other sources of revenue for the department so that they can do additional work on non-game species. And one of the things that we're looking to do this session is support Chairman Nathan Small of the House Appropriations Committee as he creates a new fund called the Grow Fund. This is a new idea to prop up new programs at agencies over a 3-year period to give them small amounts of funding to see if it can become part of our recurring budget. And thankfully, we're really appreciative of him. He's proposing to give the department $10 million over the next 3 years to do non-game work. And so we're also looking at that kind of thing so that the burden isn't solely shouldered by hunting and fishing.
And I know there's been discussion in other states or places about a backpack fee or hiking boot fee because people who walk, just hike, are using the asset, the resource, and they don't pay for it necessarily except through their general taxes. Is that anything New Mexico might do?
Well, Inez, that's something that's talked about often. It's a very challenging thing to do to implement a backpack tax. Other states have other types of funding mechanisms. In the state of Missouri, for example, 1/8 of 1% of all gross receipts tax goes to fund their state wildlife agency, which is the Missouri Department of Conservation. So I do think that those options are available as long-term goals for us to accomplish, and we're certainly looking towards that. Right now, what we're trying to do, though, is really save the department from the crisis that it's currently in, and the fastest way to do that is through an increase in license fees, which is very well supported by the license buyers of the state, also from the Grow Fund that Judy talked about. And just in the last long legislative session, we were able to successfully pass the Land of Enchantment Legacy Fund, which is also going to be providing additional resources for the department to work on species of greatest conservation need. So broad funding sources are super important. I encourage every listener to become familiar with the Recovering America's Wildlife Act if they're not already. That's a piece of federal legislation. I won't get into all the details. But funding is critical for the agency to do a good job, and the fastest way to get money to the agency right now is by this fee increase.
Okay. So if I'm hearing correctly, the idea is to fix the governance at the top, and we can talk when we come back after the break about what that would look like. Raise fees so that there's an inflow of cash, get cash from the other possibilities, such as Representative Small's Grow Fund, and then also set up the department so it understands the management is of wildlife, not just the game and the fish that are being harvested.
Yeah, just again, the department's doing great work in the non-game space already, but they don't have the resources they need to do all of it. And as Judy said, there's a lack of clarity to some degree on what they actually have authority over, and that's going to be clarified through this bill.
Okay, we'll be back in a moment with more Conversations Different.
This is Patrick Dorsey, publisher of the Santa Fe New Mexican. Looking to reach a wider audience and grow your business? For 175 years, the Santa Fe New Mexican has been the trusted voice of Santa Fe, with unmatched local reach in print and online. In addition to our long-standing, independent, family-owned newspaper, we have a full-fledged marketing team with the expertise to help you succeed in the 21st century. From traditional print to precision-targeted digital advertising, we have the tools to connect you with your ideal customers. Partner with us and see the results for yourself. Advertise with the Santa Fe New Mexican and unlock your business's full potential. Visit us at santafenewmexican.com/advertising or call us at 505-995-3852. Thank you.
We are back with Conversations Different, discussing how game and fish can work in this new century to protect all wildlife and build on the great work that they have been doing for decades. Judy, in the break, we were talking about restructuring of the Game Commission. And as we had said before, this has been something that Representative McQueen and others had worked on for for years. And as I recall, the governor didn't like a previous version of the bill and got rid of it. But as I understand, there's a little more cooperation and thinking that she's going to support the reform. What is going to be different about the Game Commission if this passes?
Yeah, thank you, Inez. So you're right. It has been, I think, over a decade now that our groups have been working towards not only commission reform, but these other aspects of modernization of the department too. There have been, I think, 4 iterations of a game commission reform bill, for lack of a better word, that have gone into the legislature. They only one passed, which was in 2023. It did pass with very strong bipartisan support in the legislature, which was great. It was just the commission reform piece. It wasn't the other parts of the bill that we're talking about doing. It was pocket vetoed, which means she didn't specifically give a veto message, but she just
didn't sign it.
She just didn't sign it.
Right.
So we didn't know at the time exactly why that was, but there are pretty crucial differences between the bill from 2023 and the one that we're talking about now. That bill did take away some of her appointments and give them to the legislature.
Right.
So it is a 7-member commission, and that bill would have taken away 4 positions and given them to people who aren't
And
the governor.
executives are very protective
Yes,
of their powers.
Executive authority is very important to executives. And so that might have been why. We don't know why, but it's possible that that's why. And so this current version of the bill would actually leave all 7 appointments with the governor's office. And instead of taking appointments away from the governor's office, it would create a nominating committee similar to other nominating committees.
Kind of like what they do for judges.
Right.
Right.
And so who that nominating committee would be made up of is also in the bill. So who those people are is outlined. And then they would have to give, I think it's a minimum of 2 names per position to the governor, and she would have to choose.
So she has a choice, but there's going to be some scrutiny. And as I understand from the call that we had talking about this with the sponsors, they're also going to, it's not just going to be geographical in nature. It's going to be like you have to have a biologist, you have to have a fisherman, different kinds of representation of people who love the outdoors.
Yeah, and Jesse might want to add on to this after I finish, but currently there's only 2 sort of enumerated positions with titles. So there is a conservation position there, and there is an agricultural interest position there. And those 2 would be kept in the current bill, but we would also add on a scientist and a hunter or fisherman. I can't even speak.
An angler.
With
Angler,
the current commission structure, there's actually no designated seat that specifies a hunter and angler must be on the commission. Historically, we've had a lot of hunters and anglers on the commission, and of course it makes sense, but with this new bill, it's a requirement that at least one of the commissioners, at minimum one of the commissioners, has to be a hunter and angler. So the hunting community is very excited about that. Another very important part of the commission reform is that there'll be a process for removal. No longer can commissioners be removed without cause. And it's that provision that'll prevent some of the issues you mentioned earlier, Inez, about there being vacancies on the commission having trouble getting a quorum and having to cancel meetings and things like that. So there's a lot of fixes in here, and we're really, really excited about what it's going to do for the future of wildlife management in New Mexico.
And considering that we're in a position where we're getting a new president in a little over a month as we tape this, who has not been particularly fond of public lands, the next Interior Secretary, if confirmed, has no experience in public lands. It seems important to shore up protection at the state level. Would you agree with that, Judy? Or
Yes, for sure. There are definitely more threats, not just to public lands, but to wildlife in general. I've heard talk of getting rid of the Endangered Species Act completely from the incoming Trump administration. And so that makes it, it was critical.
And we're going to be able to pollute because we don't want red tape.
Yeah.
So that would
And
not be
so-
good for animals and fish and birds.
I doubt that will actually happen, but the threat is severe, and I'm sure lots of not great things will happen at the federal level for wildlife and public lands. And so all the more reason to shore up our state agencies, make sure they have the resources, make sure they have the tools they need, make sure they have the authority they need. And I will say, just to go backwards for one quick second, the other difference between 2023 and now, which I think is critical to mention, is that our coalition, along with our bill sponsors, have had some really intense and robust discussions with the governor's office this year, and they have been involved in sort of working out some of the chinks in this. And so that's another difference between the last time we tried this and now that I just wanted to mention.
She's very detail-oriented, and once her staff buys in and takes that back to the governor, then you have a much better chance of getting it passed and signed and all of the things that you want.
Yeah, and the New Mexico Department of Game and Fish has been in those meetings as well. And, the key to robust wildlife populations is high-quality habitat. And we rely heavily on our federal land managers to manage the land. We rely heavily on our state wildlife agency to manage the wildlife. But there's absolutely a role to play at the state level for us to work on habitat projects, especially as those projects are designed to really help species of greatest conservation need, which, as Judy mentioned earlier, also benefits the game species. Back in 2020, this is just another indication of the commitment hunters have to funding conservation. Back in 2020, the hunting and angling community in New Mexico worked really hard to double the price of our required habitat stamp. That's a stamp that every hunter and angler who's going to be recreating on public lands must purchase, and 100% of the proceeds from that goes to habitat projects on our federally managed public lands. So as a hunting and angling community representative, I can say we're very thrilled that we're broadening the funding mechanisms and money's coming in from other places besides just our license fees. But just really want to reiterate that this fee increase is something that's very strongly supported by the sporting community who purchases those licenses.
The people who hunt and fish don't mind supporting the habitat and the animals that they are going to go look at when they go out.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's kind of, if you can afford bullets, I guess you can afford your stamp.
That's right.
Because ammunition has not gone down.
It's not inexpensive, that's for sure.
No. In closing, Judy, how do you expect to go out and sell this bill or these pieces of legislation?
I think we've already seen that there's broad support among New Mexicans for each of these three pieces. And so I think, we keep talking to the public about how much we know they already value wildlife. That's been shown a million times in surveys, but it's also shown in economic data about where they're spending their money. And so we already know that they care about these issues, so that's good. So we need to just keep making the connection between how the Game and Fish Department works and that wildlife that they view and love. And I think that they will understand that. So.
And if your listeners, Inez, would like to see kind of a list of some of the supporters and learn more about the bill, they can go to wildlifefornm.org. That's all spelled out, wildlifefornm.org. And we've got a great website, a resource that provides the public with additional information. But it should be noted that here, Judy and I are talking about this bill, and we're working together so hard on this. And Judy represents the bird watchers, essentially. She represents wildlife lovers who are not hunters and anglers, who are not involved in the consumptive use of these wild resources. And I represent the New Mexico Wildlife Federation, the oldest and largest hunting and angling organization in the state. I say that to illustrate how broad the support is for this. Groups from across the spectrum are working together hand in hand to accomplish this. It's a very, very well-supported effort, and we're really excited about it.
It sounds like the kind of bipartisan compromise legislation that everyone says they want.
That's right. In a country that's often very, very divided, we find that conservation, public lands, and wildlife is something that unites the masses, and that's certainly been the case through this effort.
And I would just add, too, that if people are interested or have questions on that website, both Jesse and my contact information is there, and we can answer other questions about the bill if people have them.
And on that note, this has been another Conversations Different. We'll be back next week.